To everyone who's dealt with the hassles of accessing healthcare and thought, it shouldn't have to be like this, you're right, it shouldn't. Partner MD is better healthcare for an even better you. Much more than concierge medicine, Partner MD is healthcare the way it should be. 24/7 access to care, virtually no waiting, and the one-on-one attention you need to help maintain your healthy lifestyle. Visit partnermd.com for pricing and more information.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Podcast. This is Matt here. It's our first in our bi-weekly run of episodes. So, I'm curious to know what people think about us going bi-weekly as opposed to doing weekly podcasts. If you feel like the quality is better after this bi-weekly one, for sure, maybe we'll keep it up. But if you're looking for more content and you'd like me to go weekly again, let me know. We can see, a way that we can maybe work that out and see, if there's a way I can get content up weekly. So just let me know what you think about that, what your thoughts on whether we go weekly or bi-weekly. And, by all means, I'm happy to take in any input or even, ideas that you have for podcast episodes. A few announcements. So we do have two great guests on our show tonight. We've got Ty and Brett from ComeuppанceReviews.net. They're going to be joining us here in a little bit to talk about the newest member of the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur Hall of Fame. Before they join us, I wanted to make a couple announcements. First and foremost, I found the old podcast that got removed from TalkShoe. They were on an old external hard drive, so now it's just a matter of getting them back into TalkShoe. They're labeled by date, which helps because I can upload them by their original date, and they will slot in chronologically where they originally were, which is really great. The problem is because they're labeled by date, I don't really know what the content is, so I have to listen for about 10 or 15 minutes or so. But once I listen, I'm then able to get a sense of what the episode's about. I can upload it into TalkShoe and make a description there, explain what movie we talked about, other topics, things like that. I think I've done about 4 episodes so far, 3 or 4, so hopefully we'll get the other 20 or so up as soon as possible. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And if you're looking for those old ones, if you're subscribing, you just find them at the bottom of the page because they would be the oldest ones, just because that's how I'm uploading them, is chronologically. In other news, over the weekend, I was a guest on the Exploding Helicopter podcast, which was a really great time. Will, who hosts the podcast, he was really great host, and it was a lot of fun. We talked about Codename Wild Geese, Klaus Kinski film, directed by Antonio Margheriti. It was a really great time. He said the podcast should be posted probably sometime mid-December. So watch our space. We'll be able to keep you updated. But also, probably the best way to do it is to subscribe to Exploding Helicopter Podcast. And then you'll get the newest one up there. And there's some really great older ones up there. One that I really love that he did with his friend Dara on Rambo 3. But plenty of other really great ones up there. So I would check that podcast out for sure. And then also we've got the holidays coming here. So we've got Ty and Brett guesting on tonight's episode. I don't know if we're going to get more guests before the new year, just because it is hard around the holiday season to, get people to visit and guest on the show. We'll see what happens, though. We'll see how that goes. But that's the plan, is to maybe look in the new year. But I'll ask around and see if I can get somebody else on a later show, maybe in December. In terms of content, I'm looking to try to build up a lot of content so that when the holidays come, we won't miss a beat. So that I can, have content for Christmas week, Thanksgiving week, and so on already done, and then I can just post it. That way we don't run into gaps. Because the one thing I don't want, since we just got this back on the road after the hiatus, I don't want to have breaks again, even if it is Christmas or Thanksgiving. And I'm sure probably anybody who's reading the blog or listening to the podcast, you might want a break from family as well. So that's the plan, is to not have any breaks during the holidays, but rather to get as much as I can done beforehand, and then get the post up. So fingers crossed, hopefully we'll make that happen. All right, so without any further ado, let's welcome Ty and Brett, and we'll talk about the newest member of the DTVC Hall of Fame.
Who took my purse?
All right, so that, of course, was Reb Brown in the being mocked by the guys on MST3K from Space Mutiny there, one of the most famous scenes. And yes, Reb Brown is now going to be our 27th member of the Hall of Fame. So we wanted to honor him tonight, and I thought, who better than to have on the show to discuss Reb Brown's career than Ty and Brett from Comeuppance Reviews. So welcome, you guys, to the show.
Hi.
Thanks for having us. This is Brett.
Hi, this is Tyler.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys, and welcome. And before we get into talking about Reb Brown, I just wanted to bring up your Comeuppance Reviews and all of that. For people that aren't familiar with your blog, what is Comeuppance Reviews about? What do you guys do over there?
Ty, do you want to go for that?
Well, you could start, and then I'll say how it really started, I guess.
Okay, well, basically, it's a review site for action movies of all kinds. I mean, we try to go more obscure. We talk about the movies put out by AIP, PM, try to concentrate on undiscovered gems like Stick Fighter and movies like that we want to bring to people's attention. But there's also a lot of 80s nostalgia, video store nostalgia. And so basically action movies of all kinds, but concentrating on the more cult-ish ones, but with a leaning towards video store nostalgia is how I would give it a capsule review of the site.
Yeah,
a perfect way.
Yeah, I think that was perfect. I love you guys have a podcast out now. You guys have done a few episodes, and one thing I've loved about your podcast is that you've been finding some of the how do I say, like the more, there's a lot of tropes with these kinds of movies, but you guys are finding some of the more interesting ones, like American movies, or your most recent one on punch fighting, which I just read today, which I thought was great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, yeah, we're a little late to the podcasting bandwagon. But I do remember when we were on your podcast years ago, and that was really our first intro to the podcasting world. So thank you for that.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think you guys have been on twice, right? Because I'm trying to get the
old
old ones
good
up.
Memory.
Yeah, and I remember, because I think the second time you guys were on, what happened was I think Jamie was moving, and I was like looking to see if I could get a co-host, and then I think you guys were busy, so I ended up just doing it myself, and then I think all of us did Man from Tai Chi for that second.
Ah, right, yes.
I remember that. Wow.
Yeah, so that was a great. It's because we lost TalkShoe. Had something happen to their site, and I lost the first 25 episodes of the podcast. So that means the very first one that you guys were on, I still haven't gotten to uploading yet, but I did get the Man from Tai Chi one up. So that one is there.
Okay. So I thought that was gone because of whatever, the lost to the sands of time.
So what happened was that that's what I thought too, where I thought maybe I had too many episodes. I don't know what it was, but no, they had some disaster happen, and they lost everything pre-2015. So luckily I found them on an external hard drive. They all have the dates, but they don't have the topics. So I have to kind of listen and hear,
I see.
who was on them and all that. Yeah, so hopefully, but one thing that's cool about TalkShoe is I can upload them chronologically. So I've been able to put in the original dates, and then they slot in exactly where they were supposed to be.
Well, I'm glad you were able to recover that.
That's good. Thank goodness.
Yeah, it definitely helps. Yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up before we get into Reb Brown, actually, about your podcast, is I listened to the Punch Fighters once, and I realized I think I had the wrong idea about punch fighting. I was thinking it was like just those kind of more modern, like UFC ones with you got guys in like designer jeans and busy, punching each other, stuff like that. And I didn't realize that you had a more broader definition that was like the 80s, just like you said, guys in the what was it the best way? It's an underground fight with guys punching each other with bare knuckles with other people watching and clutching, different denominations of money.
Yes, I think that's how we view punch fighting. I mean, I do think the punch fighting genre was around before UFC, but because I think UFC and MMA, or whatever you want to call it, is fairly popular, perhaps more popular than those movies, maybe it kind of is what people think of today. But I as we said on our podcast, I think we can trace it back to the 70s with the movie The Hitter.
With Ron O'Neal.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So that's, and then you kind of get into like that the blood sport types and all of that with the underground fighting in it. Yeah. It seems like a lot of times they're in Thailand often. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right. And so I think what's good about having them in Thailand is that if they're using play money, we don't recognize.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good observation. We didn't mention that on our episode, but that's true. A lot of them take place in other countries, like those Southeast Asian countries. And I can only assume it must be immensely popular over there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess because I know Muay Thai is so popular that maybe it just seems like a natural extension to have underground fighting or something like that.
Yeah, it could be, or maybe they have strict laws against it, so it's like really enticing to people. I'm not really sure.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so
you got to relax the laws here.
Yeah, I agree. We start a campaign for that.
Yeah.
Right. We could maybe have more of these underground fighting. I mean, I don't know. Like the problem is that you have to get like a Kerry Tagawa or a Patrick Kilpatrick. You have to find enough of those out there. I mean, I think there was one. Wasn't there one that Samuel L. Jackson was running?
Oh, yes, Arena.
Yes, which I thought that one was a little bit iffy. Like I could have done with. And I guess I'm not a big Kellen Lutz fan. It's not like anything personal against him. He doesn't seem to work for me, and so maybe that hurt the overall thing. But it just seemed like that one was like as. I don't know. It was just like less fun, and part of it was actually, now that you mention it, it didn't have the guys clutching money because it was done like on like kind of streaming or something, right?
Yeah, internet money.
That it might be a bit of a loophole because maybe you can somehow virtually clutch cash in this era of PayPal and Venmo. I mean.
Bitcoin.
Right, you've got your cryptocurrency in your hand. If you're holding your smartphone that shows your cryptocurrency balance.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean,
moving the credits.
I personally prefer the clutching the cash method. Call me old school, but I don't think the digital version would exclude it from being a punch fighter necessarily. But I definitely see your point. I mean, there's something I don't want to say soulless, but a little more computerized about it that I don't personally like.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
What's funny about Arena is that the guy was named David Lord.
Yeah, David Lord.
100 times.
David Lord.
David Lord.
Like they were really proud of that name, David Lord. I mean, it's no Brackus,
right? Or Brick Bardot or whatever. Yeah. Right. I know. There's plenty of other good ones out there. David Lord is kind of like I don't know how you say it. Like it's as as tame as they get. Maybe they knew someone named David Lord. I remember when I was in high school when we did debate class, we did what we called point words, where you would just slip a word in that had nothing to do with with what you were talking about, just completely at random. And maybe that was like what it is. I think we initially, it started because somebody said big dog. And then we tried to see how many times we could fit big dog into our debate speeches. And maybe that was the idea. It's like David Lord. How many times can you say David Lord in this movie?
Or it could be the type of thing like when Matthias Hughes played Victor Bragg. In what movie was that, Ty?
It was Fists of Iron.
So in Fists of Iron. So, their name has some sort of a significance. Like, as we said, I think in our review on the site, if you're the victor, you got to brag. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
So maybe they're saying, oh, he's David Lord. He's the Lord of the punch fighting, or who something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I'd rather be Lord of the dance.
Exactly. You can be Michael Flatley.
Well, Kellen Lutz is very close to being the Lord of the dance.
Yes. That would be really if they did a new version of that. Yeah. I don't know. I shouldn't say like it's. I shouldn't be. I'm on a podcast. I'm sure Kellen Lutz doesn't listen to our podcast, but I just like I don't know what it is about him, and the name obviously doesn't help either.
That's true.
Lutz is that's not always good there.
Well, it's kind of like this new crop of people like Sean Locke or Matthew Reese or.
Ryan.
To a certain extent, Messner. What's his name? Johnny Messner.
Johnny Messner, yeah.
It seems like they don't really have the cachet of an Evan Lurie or some of the other guys from the 90s.
Or Joe Lara.
Joe Lara, good example.
Yeah. I mean, I just watched one today. I think you guys have seen. I think you may have mentioned it on your pod recently. With Showdown in Manila.
Oh yes,
and that's got Nevsky as like the kind of the big guy, and I was thinking like that Nevsky was like he was like, I mean, obviously they had Matthias Hughes in it as well, so but Nevsky's like the Matthias Hughes type baddie, and Casper Van Dien, or I mean they had like I mean that movie had 3 Hall of Famers that had for DTVC Hall of Famers, they had Rothrock, Olivier Gruner, and Don the Dragon Wilson all just coming in at the end to
on the boat,
mop up or something. So. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like that's the thing is like, how do you get those next group of guys in, that are like the guys that we want to see in a movie like this?
That's a great question, because it seems like these guys today are, I don't want to say effeminate, but they don't seem to have that serious quality that like a Dolph Lundgren has. And I think that's probably why in that movie with Matthew Rhys, Riot. They put him in with Dolph because Dolph is sort of like the anchor. He can ground the whole thing. And if you want to introduce a new guy, it's almost like an entry level kind of thing where you put him with Dolph to, test the waters.
Yeah. And I always feel like sometimes that approach isn't good, because then you're like, like for example, with Nevsky, he might be great, but, Casper Van Dien was out acting him the whole movie. And then it's like, when it comes to the fight scenes, I'm like, yeah, I want to see Cynthia Rothrock tear it up. I'm not so,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so they kind of overshadow it sometimes. And yeah, so it's hard to figure out how you get, I mean, Scott Adkins is one that I think has been able to break through.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they've made it work with him. And I think part of it is he did get some of his own stuff. I mean, he did great with the little bit that he had in the second Expendables when he was playing Van Damme's buddy. So that was really good too. I think that's part of it too, is you got to kind of take the most of what you get when you get a small part.
That's true. And also he was lucky to get into movie theaters, because most of his stuff, at least here in this country, I don't know how it is in other countries, but at least here it's all DTV.
Yeah, that's a good point. That was a good place for him. I think he's also done some other bit parts in other big screen things, and so he just kind of takes whatever he can get, which I think is a great approach to it, which for us as DTV fans, we love that, because we like just do everything. That's
true. Well, because in the DTV world, he's like a main star. He'd be like a top liner, like an Accident Man. He's the guy, on front and center on the box art, whereas for a movie that's going to the movie theater, he'd be sort of in the background somewhere.
Yeah, and so I think he's definitely one, but it's going to be interesting to see as we go forward, like how some of these guys, because the part of it is it seems like the older guys are not stopping anytime soon, right? I mean, it doesn't look like Dolph just turned 62, I think. Van Damme's going to be 60 next year. Seagal is going to be almost 70. I think he's born like 51, 52. So he's closing in on 70
years old.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are older and they're not stopping, and so by the time maybe like Adkins, I think was born in 76, so he's if these guys go another 10 years, like if Dolph is looking at it and saying like, well, I can go to 70 because Stallone and Schwarzenegger are going to 70, well, that's another 10 years, and so now Adkins is going to be in his mid 50s by the time so it's going to be interesting to see like how these guys can kind of get in and kind of catch our attention and get some of these roles and maybe start to be the next guys,
Yes, I totally agree. That will be very interesting to see. And what's interesting about that is, I don't want to lose my train of thought here, but so we were talking about how one of the things we tend to point out, and certainly not in a negative way, but certain patterns. Sometimes they're cliches, but things you see often, because I think cliche has a negative connotation that I always say I don't like, because they're things that you need to see. So I wish there was a word that meant cliche, but not, with a negative connotation.
Cliche.
And one of the ones that I want to bring up now, because it's kind of what we're talking about, is when a group of young punks kind of go up against an older character, and then the older character beats them up, kills them, and generally shames them.
Yes. Yeah, which is always fun. I think that's one of the few areas with Seagal that I enjoy with his newer stuff, is when he gets in a situation like that, and he just kind of does that like a keto slap chop stuff, and
slap chop.
Yeah. So
he'll do the Grady in the next movie too.
Yeah, Grady. No, well, I think a good example of that is Urban Justice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that I agree. And yeah, so sometimes you see it and you're like, okay, yeah, that's what I want to see with these guys, and see them get after it. And it's going to be interesting, because I mean, I don't know, I just turned 40 and I get aches and pains all the time, so I can't imagine making an action movie feels great when here. You know,
I know it's all the more impressive. Well, it's funny. I just turned 39.
Yeah,
so
excellent. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, we think about like the idea, and like it's funny because we think of these guys like when they did their best stuff, they were kind of our age at that point. I mean,
yeah, they were younger.
Yeah.
But not like super young, not early 20s. We're talking 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Seagal was 38 when he did his first movie.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing. And, you know, Lundgren was younger when he did, like, you know, View to a Kill and He-Man and stuff, but he did most of his stuff when he was older, too. So, yeah, it's interesting to see. Maybe that's, like, what we need to think of. We need to skew our age. Like, we need to think, like, if you're going to be good at this, you know, you can't be 20-something. It's when you get, you know, into those later ages that's so maybe we need to think of it that way too, that like maybe Atkins is just reaching his peak at this point.
That's true, but I think he's out there, you know, holding up the DTV genre like a pillar. Like if it wasn't for him, where would we be?
Sure.
Right.
And we'll look at Clint Eastwood, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. Now we're going to start looking here at Reb Brown here. We'll transition into Reb Brown. But I think Reb Brown actually kind of dovetails with what we're talking about here.
Oh, I agree, yes.
With all of this stuff. Where do you guys think he sits in sort of the DTV actioner? I mean, I kind of think you've got your top tier with the, like, you know, the Dolphs and those. Maybe second tier is like, I don't know if that's like Olivier Gruner and those guys. And then maybe like, I mean, I don't know where you put like a Zagarino.
Jeff Wincott. You know,
right. Yeah, I mean, Zagarino second or third, I don't know, you know. But Reb Brown seems like he might even be below them, but yet still, I don't know, a lot of fun. What do you guys think?
I know that's a really good question.
Above Zags, maybe a little bit above Zags.
I mean, I think he's a little bit above Zags. I mean, because he has done some. I mean, I don't know if we're basing this on his overall body of work, because I have in front of me in preparation for being on this podcast. I have a list in front of me of all the Reb movies I've seen.
Yeah, and he's a little bit more extensive than Zagarino, I think.
Yes, I think he has a bit more range.
Yeah.
Because out of his 61 movie and TV credits, but I said out of the 61 credits that I found on IMDb, I've seen 19 out of the 61.
Wow.
And before we even get into the action part of his career, because, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, he was really in that state of grace where he was making awesome movie after awesome movie. He was in a movie, Big Wednesday. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't seen that.
Jan Michael Vincent.
It has Jan Michael Vincent and William Catt, which is interesting because they were both later known for being in DTV action movies. But this is not an action movie. It's it's directed and I think written by John Milius, and it's like a coming of age surfing movie.
I think I've heard of it now. Now that you mentioned that part, that sounds familiar. And
it's absolutely worth watching. I mean, his role in it is not big. He's not one of the main characters, but he's definitely recognizable. And, you know, we were talking about older actors. I mean, and also I saw he was born in 1948.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So I don't think of him as someone who was born in the 40s, but apparently he was. But to answer your question, as far as action stars, I probably wouldn't put him with the Schwarzeneggers and the Stallones, but maybe the next level down.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you mentioned him being born in the 40s. One of the things that I found that was really funny is we get like the MeTV channel and Antenna and those, you know, those retro channels that have shows. And it's always funny, like an episode of Alice will be on or Three's Company or something, and there's Reb Brown, you know, and it's like, I probably saw that episode, you know, maybe not when it first aired. I might have been too young for when it first aired, but like when it was in reruns at some point, and not even thought that was Reb Brown, not even thought about that.
Oh, yeah.
Know? So
Well, yeah, because also he's in a TV movie, and I'm a big TV movie fan, called Girl Most Likely To, which was written by Joan Rivers. And it's absolutely worth seeing, and it was just released on Blu-ray.
Really?
And yes, and the plot is really cool, and very, if you like Joan Rivers, which I do, it's very much in her personality, her mold. Like Stockard Channing plays this sort of homely, I don't know if you'd say ugly, but maybe ugly girl. And she goes to this college, and all the boys and the girls are kind of ignoring her and shunning her because they thinks she's ugly, and then she gets into a car accident, and then after the reconstructive surgery, she's beautiful. And so what she does is she takes revenge on all the people that wronged her. And it's a great movie, and I would recommend people check it out. And he's in it, I think, is probably like a jock.
Jock number one.
Yeah, exactly. Something like that. So it's not really a vehicle for Reb Brown, but he is there if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah, I definitely, I think that's one thing that has surprised me over time is where he tends to pop up, what you see him in.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to keep interrupting, but yeah, he's in a lot of television and sitcoms and Miami Vice episode, Viking Bikers from Hell.
Right, yes,
That was a great episode.
Which is a good episode, and Miami Vice I would count as one of my all-time favorite shows. And he is definitely one of the Viking Bikers from Hell, if memory serves.
Yeah, I am a huge Miami Vice fan as well. I love that show. It's one of the cool things is that that's on DVD now. It's almost like it's like film noir, but with like pastels and stuff. And then you get like these great actors and stuff. I always love that show.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And well, because it's Michael Mann, and he gave almost every episode like a cinematic quality. Like almost every episode is a mini movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one thing I love about that. Now
in that episode of Miami Vice, there's John Matuzak.
Oh, he's in that too. Yeah.
Yeah. One Man Force.
One Man Force himself is in that one too. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's a classic.
Yeah, so that's always those shows. I mean, you never knew who was going to be on Miami Vice. You see like G. Gordon Liddy, Miles Davis. One time Bill Russell, basketball player, was on. I mean, it's just they had everybody on those shows. It was really cool to see.
Yes, and also they had a lot of music stars, like that classic Crazy episode with James Brown.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's an insane episode. I mean, that's really crazy. Yeah, where James Brown is an alien that likes peanut butter.
Right.
Someone had to think of that.
Someone had to think of that. And I think Chris Rock is in that episode too.
Yeah, he is like a crime scene photographer or something.
Yeah, he had like a small recurring role. And they did have a lot of music stars like Ted Nugent and Leonard Cohen, I think, is in an episode.
I remember the Nuge tried to off Don Johnson, and he had a steel briefcase, a reinforced briefcase to like deflect the bullet, which the idea of going into that's my plan for somebody that I know is going to shoot me is I'm going to have a briefcase that I can deflect the bullet with. But that was Crockett. You had to give it to him. That was his style.
Well, he definitely met his match in that episode, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but let's just say something very dramatic happens in that episode.
That's right. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, if you're looking for new TV to binge, I don't know if that's streaming as well. But that's a show. If you've never really gotten into Miami Vice, it's more than just rolled up sleeves and pastels and neon. It's a really great show, and I think for people that like the kind of stuff that we're into, between the guest stars, the music, the great '80s music, and just like that, the like you said, the way Michael Mann shoots it, I highly recommend it. It's something to binge for people that have not really that are looking for something and they've never really seen it before.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's certainly up my alley because it has that totally 80s vibe, which is fantastic, but also the shows are very well written, very smart, with a lot of good drama and emotion, and they bring up all sorts of issues, and like you said, the guest stars and everything about it, just something really came together with Miami Vice.
Yeah, for sure. Now, with Reb Brown, what was the first time that you guys ever saw? Like, what was your first Reb Brown flick?
Strike Commando?
Yeah, that was your first?
Well, I have to remember. Maybe it was Your.
Yeah.
I think for me it was Your also.
Yeah, Your. Yeah, it was Your.
Yeah. See, my first was Space Mutiny. And so I feel like I had a different look at it because I learned about him through MST3K, through Space Mutiny. And then when I started doing the blog, I knew about Your. But I doing the blog and like people, I'm realizing like, no, this guy's got all kinds of stuff. And I think it was you guys had done some of his older action stuff. And then I think Simon, who does the explosive action. Mm-hmm. I think he may have even sent me Strike Commando.
Nice.
So I mean, it was like this whole learning experience. But it was funny because he was still Space Mutiny. He was still Reb Brown from Space Mutiny in these other movies. There was still the screaming. There was still all that great stuff.
So much great screaming. He has the best scream maybe of all time.
Well, and that's for sure. And if I'm not mistaken, Ty, didn't Simon send us a copy of Robo War?
Yes, that is correct. He did.
Oh, so we might send it to both of us. Yeah, because I think I got Robo War as well.
Now, did you get the recently released Robo War Blu-ray?
No, I have not been collecting DVDs like I used to. Yeah, is it good? It's awesome.
I definitely recommend it because not only has the movie never looked better, but it comes with a CD of the soundtrack, and it has a ton of extras with like they interview like almost a full cast and some of the behind the scenes people. And if you watch all the extras together, it almost acts as like a documentary of what it was like to shoot action movies in the Philippines at that time.
Oh God, that is amazing.
It is, and they talk to people you would never think would even be interviewed. So Severin, the company, did a great job on that release. And actually one of the things that came out is that the director, Bruno Mattei, specifically asked Reb Brown to scream in that movie. Because he said he loved to scream, and it would seem weird if he didn't scream in the movie. So he specifically requested him, even though it didn't make a ton of sense, to do it anyway. And that's one of the stories that comes out when you watch the extras on that Blu-ray.
Now, what would you say? For me, I think it is between those two, Robo War and Strike Commando, is my favorite Reb Brown. Is that for you guys, or is there another one that you're thinking of as well?
I think so. I think Robo War could be his best movie.
I had a feeling you'd be asking this question, so I've been really mulling it over. And it's between Robo War and Strike Commando. I think I'm going to have to give a slight edge to Robo War, but it could really go either way for me.
Yeah, I think now that you're mentioning about Robo War, I think that was one where Bruno Mattei, I think it was kind of like the best combination of like that, Italian schlock director. But because I was talking with Will at Exploding Helicopter about Antonio Margheriti. And
yes.
How, I think these Italian directors, they have a certain, like you were talking with Michael Mann with the cinematic quality, they have a certain cinematic quality to the way they made their movies. It was like,
absolutely.
Yeah, like they came from the same places, like Fellini and these really great, and Rossellini and all of them. And then somewhere their paths diverged. And they started making just like schlock, action films and sci-fi and whatnot, just kind of kicking it out there. But they still did it in a way that showed that they were like these professional directors that knew how to shoot scenes, knew how to add things in that we'd like. And I love the fact that he liked Reb Brown's scream and he had to add it in there. That's a really great fact that I'd love to see. I mean, the idea of knowing about those Philippine movies, I would love to, because there were so many of them and they were so great.
Most of them are just way, you can't stop watching.
Well, it's true. There is something addictive about the Italian style of filmmaking that I personally really love. I'm a big fan of Italian horror movies as well. And all those directors, they were journeymen. They made westerns, they made action, they made horror. They worked across all genres. And when that happened, something, like you said, they come from that deeply, professional Italian background. But like you said, then they started working in the more B-movie areas and they brought that professionalism, but also they think, I think, a little bit differently because they're trying to make a quote unquote American type movie, but it never ends up that way because their culture, something about it always comes through.
That's a good point. Yeah, especially with a lot of those ones from the late 80s, you get the sense that they were trying to remake Rambo, or they were just trying to like sell something to the Rambo audience, cash in on the Rambo fame.
Oh yeah, Thunder is a perfect example.
Yeah, and I get that sense that I think you're right. Like they couldn't, there was something missing about, it's different from being an American who grew up in America and like knows, like, and I think in a way it works better for us as Americans to have it being done by Italians who are kind of reflecting what we like back on us.
Yes, and that to me is so interesting.
Yeah, it makes it more fun than when we see, I think a lot of DTV movies nowadays, and I don't know if you guys agree, like the newer ones, a lot of times they aren't getting like real directors. A lot of times it's like, stunt coordinators or people that, even actors or, people who just are there to kind of just film the movie. And then it's all going to get fixed in post. They're going to get the shots they want in post, all of it, and it's all
CGI in post.
Right, CGI in post. Yeah, and I think that does remove a little bit of what we came to this whole DTV thing, because I know it is there was a reason why we came to these movies. It wasn't just that we like bad stuff. There's something fun about these movies.
There's something about them. There's something intriguing.
Yeah.
Well, it is because I think people they're very into horror, and horror is a very well-mined genre where a lot of people are talking about it. Same thing with sci-fi, but there's a certain blind spot when it comes to action.
Yeah.
And there's a niche there that you talk about, we talk about, Simon talks about, and others. where it's not as well mined as, like, say, horror or a genre like that. And there's so much gold in the action genre, but I don't think people are realizing it or talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's one thing that, like, when you think of DTV action, and Reb Brown being part of the that lower tier. I mean, he's doing these lower budget Italian ones. He's doing AIP, American International Pictures. I always love that name, American International Pictures. But those kind of movies that there was an assembly line piece to them, sure. They're trying to get them out as soon as possible, try to get them in under budget, but they kind of got to what we like about action movies, where it is about, maybe not having the most. We don't need the deepest plot. We're good with, we can suspend belief. I think we would rather have Scott Adkins in a movie using his English accent, and no explanation why he's a Brit in America doing something. We'd rather have that than have him either try to fake an American accent or give us this big lengthy explanation for why he's in the United States. Just bring him into the United States with his British accent and have him beating people up and doing it really well, doing it with really great fancy martial arts. We'd rather have that than have, 20 minutes of you trying to tell us, because chances are when that script gets moved on to 5 other people, it's going to get messed up anyway. So who cares, and of course when they mess it up a lot of times that gives us more fun to pick out with the movie. But you know what I mean? We don't need it to be too extravagant.
And that's true, and that's a good example about Scott Adkins, because I do think something about him works better when he is in England, or is what you might say in his natural habitat, instead of forcing him into
kind of like what
some
Van
other...
Damme does. They have like a French name. It's like, well, okay, he's French, but he's American.
Oh yeah, you're talking about Van Damme, right?
Van Damme, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Van Damme can't fake it, right? He can't fake an American accent. But I mean, how many times have we seen Scott Adkins with an American accent? And it's like, why do that? Like, for us as action fans, that's part of the novelty of Scott Adkins, is that he's got the English accent, and so that adds to it. And I think it feels like when they make somebody do something like that, it adds to me. It's more fun for me to have Jean-Claude Van Damme as a CIA agent with a French accent and no explanation for why that is, if he's going to beat people up and take people out,
Oh, yes, and another thing that I think we can all agree that we like about the action genre is that it brought a lot of stars from other countries into the fold. Like a lot, I mean, in the post-Schwarzenegger world, I think people with thick accents, they didn't see that as a problem.
Right.
You could go down the line. I mean, Olivia Gruner,
Gary Daniels.
Van Damme. I'm sure Ty could think of some with thick accents.
It's Yorgo Orgonovsky.
It's like not an obstacle anymore, because it's because the DTV genre is sort of almost welcoming to that. Like, you don't have to speak the Queen's English to be in a movie where you're beating people up and shooting them with a machine gun.
Right. And in fact, it's better if you kind of keep the acting part of it to a minimum. I mean, when I think of those Blood Fist movies with Don the Dragon Wilson, again, I love Don the Dragon Wilson, so I don't want to be casting aspersions on his.
No, we would never do that.
No, but it worked better if he had fewer lines. It worked better if you weren't trying to force him to play a part or emote some kind of it was better if it was just Don the Dragon Wilson. And I mean, it seemed like everything after the Punch Fighter Blood Fist, when it was all these just stick Don the Dragon Wilson in L.A. Right? Yeah, put him in prison, put him in L.A. and have everybody against him, and for 90 minutes he's got to just run and beat people up and blow things up, and then at the end he clears his name and he makes it. The fewer scenes that we had him talking about things, the better. And again, that's not to say anything bad about Don the Dragon Wilson as an actor. I just, it was a combination of the material. The scripts were not going to, they generally weren't proofread that much, because you got to get them out there. So the lines were not always great. I mean, how many times do you watch a movie and you're like, I think somebody missed a line, because it just seems like the two lines didn't go together, right? When the two people were saying them, And
I was going to say about Don the Dragon is that when he does speak, it is pretty funny. He does have a hilariously wooden voice.
Well, I think we've said many times wonderfully wooden, because we wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's hard to describe this without sounding insulting, which is not at all what we mean, but something about his flat affect and his flat tone of voice we like,
Right. Yeah, I mean, because, the thing with Don the Dragon Wilson, I mean, he was a world-class athlete, champion kickboxer. So that's really what we're watching, right? We're watching him do as many jump kicks on people and, that kind of stuff, and take out 3 or 4 guys at once. So that's really what we want to see him for. So yeah, you're right. I think kind of the wooden talking, actually, you're right. It kind of adds to it because it's like, we're not here for that. We're here to watch him fight.
Well, yeah, and it adds to the fun. And to your point, that's why they put his rankings at the beginning of those Roger Corman movies.
You're right. Yeah, so they put his belt and everything. That's a good point. Yeah.
Right. So obviously that's what they want to draw the viewer's attention towards.
Yeah.
But then again, that goes back to the classic thing. Which is easier, to find a martial artist who can act or an actor who can do martial arts?
Right. And I think that's one of the things that did frustrate me in the post-Bourne Identity climate of action movies.
Well,
and maybe
Matt Damon.
Right, because what they did is I can't remember who the blogger was that referred to the or maybe it was the guy who wrote about Seagal that referred to it as avid fart editing. Maybe it was the one who wrote the Seagalology. I can't remember who. I feel horrible right now because I'm not giving the person the credit. But that you do those quick edits, and so suddenly Matt Damon is an expert fighter if you do the quick edits. Or same with Liam Neeson. You can quick edit him and make him into a champion fighter. And what that did was it made people say, well, okay, instead of getting a great martial artist like Scott Adkins who can kill it, let's get a big name like, John Cusack or somebody like that.
Right. Yeah.
And just, edit it so he's this sharp fighter when he isn't. And I think for us who appreciate the martial arts and don't really care if it's John Cusack, that ended up hurting us a little bit.
No, I agree with that completely. And there's people, if you get really into martial arts, and there's people that will, this is kind of nerdy, and I certainly don't do this, but where they count the cuts. So in other words, if there's a fight scene and they're going 1, 2, 3, then they're kind of chopping it up. Like if you watch a movie with Donnie Yen, there's no cuts because Donnie Yen he could fight for 10 minutes with no cuts,
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that kind of brings me up to another point I wanted to mention about Reb Brown is that, with this kind of this certain climate that we have in the film industry where it's like most of the movies are these big budget, Marvel kind of things where a lot of the actors like John Cusack or, Nicolas Cage or some of the other ones, maybe not even getting that far, removed from being stars, but even like a Kellen Lutz or somebody like that who was in Twilight and stuff. It seems like these people, because there are fewer films being made in Hollywood, more things are being put direct to video. And I do wonder about like a Reb Brown. Is there a place for a Reb Brown now when before there was plenty of great places for Reb Brown?
That's a fantastic question. I have an answer, but Ty, do you want to go?
Well, I don't think he would make it today, unfortunately. People would just laugh at him. That's what they do with Chuck Norris now, with his facts and his, 2 beards and a punch or whatever he does. It's like...
Well, here's my thing with that, and this is something Ty has probably heard me say many times, but because of the complete and total dominance of Marvel and superhero movies, or capes and tights as I call them, everything gets pushed down. So it's sort of like a law of they're taking up all the real estate. So everything gets pushed down. And so that's why Robert De Niro, John Travolta, and Stallone, A-list actors are going direct to Redbox because they can't possibly compete with movies that cost $500 million. So formerly A actors that could headline a movie are pushed down. So if Robert De Niro is going direct to video, Reb Brown would be somehow 3rd tier instead of normally he'd be 2nd tier because Marvel is essentially, to paraphrase Scorsese and Coppola, ruining the movie industry. I think it would be the law of whatever gets pushed down, 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 down. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing that people misunderstood about Scorsese's comments is I think they thought he was saying like, oh, unless you're an art house picture, you're not a movie, and that wasn't what he was saying. He was saying,
I agree.
Because he came up through Roger Corman, so
right.
He knows the value of the stuff that we watch, the DTV stuff.
I think he absolutely does.
He knows what a B movie is.
Boxcar Bertha.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so he appreciates this stuff, and I think he sees it. His new movie, it's getting a limited theatrical release, but it's going to Netflix. So if Scorsese can't get a movie in the theaters, right, the theatrical run, and so then of course that means like, okay, so now you got these guys that are trying to, these low budget directors that are trying to make it. And now the big directors are coming down to DTV, taking up all that real estate, like you said. So now it's like they got to try to find it, as best. I mean, I don't know what the companies are, like Cinetel Films that do we trust them to even be able to do it, like the way that, because I've seen my share of rough Cinetel Films once. So, but those are the companies, I guess, that we have to look for to be like the vanguard to kind of save this. And I think that's the fears. And if you're Cinetel Films and you're looking at making a movie and you've got a choice. Now, Reb Brown has a name, so he still makes stuff. And, of course, he's in his 70s, so he's probably winding down as well. But I think, having a name that came through MST3K, came through being in the Captain America movie that, when the new one came out, people were kind of looking at him again. But if you're an actor like a Reb Brown, who's coming up in Hollywood, you're coming up through that. I mean, it's like you maybe try to make it in Hollywood as a big guy, like he did, get your small bit parts here and there, and then the Italian guy comes and says, "Hey, you want to fly to the Philippines and make 3 movies, and I'll pay for your house."
Right.
I mean, that we don't have that. I don't think it. I mean, I don't see a place for a Reb Brown like that anymore.
They need to pay their dues. They pay their dues in the Philippines.
But that is sad that potentially great people like Reb Brown are sort of being, pushed out by the juggernaut that are these Marvel movies. And I agree that Scorsese's comments were sort of like misinterpreted. I think he doesn't like that they're hogging all the space. He's not saying you have to be art house. It could be a down and dirty action movie, but that's not going to get this time in the sun that it might normally have gotten back when there were drive-ins or other cinematic ways to see movies,
Yeah. I mean, I read recently that Disney is trying to take up 40% of the theater space in the movie with their movies, which, if you think about it, now that they bought out Fox, they actually have the ability to do it. So if you think about that, they're trying to take up 40% of the theater space. So, I mean, I don't know what that is. If there's a 15 theater place, like that's, I don't know what 40% of that is. I can't do the math.
I'm surprised they don't have more. When you said that, I was like, I thought they already had like 60.
Well, maybe that's true.
Yeah, 60, 65.
You could be right then. Yeah, so that's even bigger. So I mean, so now you've got Universal, Sony taking up the rest of it. So there's not a lot of room for I mean, remember when we were growing up? I mean, you had like New Line Cinema, you had Orion, which, I mean, I know Orion has a bad reputation, past.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how about the elephant in the room, Canon?
Right.
Yeah, Canon.
Yeah, you couldn't do Canon nowadays. And granted, I mean, some of the best DTV stuff, we had PM Entertainment, which was catering towards the direct to video market. And,
yes.
And, but I mean, that's the thing too. Like if you're a PM Entertainment today and you're making those movies, and I think Gary Daniels has said this, that it's too expensive to make PM Entertainment movies now compared to that, but also it's enticing if there was an equivalent to PM Entertainment today to say like, okay, instead of getting Gary Daniels as the star of my movie, John Cusack is out there. I can get him and
coming
put him all
soon,
over my
maybe
cover.
like George Lopez.
Well, I mean,
George Lopez foo.
Which we'd all like to see.
Right, you could make a buddy cop film with him and George Lopez, and people would say it would be all over the cover, as opposed to for us, we would love it if there was a movie that was Reb Brown and Gary Daniels and whoever else.
That would be awesome.
Right, exactly. But they're trying to get those Netflix clicks, they're trying to get those Redbox buys, and it's like when you see those pictures on the cover, and so it's interesting now because I mean when I first started doing this, I think when we first started doing this in the late 2000s, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Christian Slater were a couple names that were just starting to do DTV, and we joked about it. We're like,
Christian Slater's going down the tubes, which I don't like, but
right, exactly. Yeah, but now it's like Robert De Niro. It's Bruce Willis. It's people who just had a Hollywood movie are doing DTV stuff because whatever they're doing, they know it's not going to get in the theater now, and that's something that we didn't see before. And I think it makes the DTV space a unique space from what it was 10 years ago for us, like having to review these movies, trying to find our way to carve out space for guys like Reb Brown isn't too hard because we can find those movies if we need to, but also we're going to make an effort to get a Reb Brown movie in. But for that new Reb Brown, if there could ever be another Reb Brown, I don't know if you can duplicate it.
No, I know what you're saying though. I mean, Reb Brown is unique, but if there was someone coming along, no, it's true. But let me ask you a question. Do you think now that with the dominance of the superhero movies and everything else is relegated, which sounds sort of negative, but relegated down, does that put like the Robert De Niro movies and like a a lower tier company like a Cinetel or even a New Image on the same plane as like a major company that would make a Robert De Niro movie, or do you think there's still a hierarchy? You know what I mean? Do you think there's parity now, or do you think it's more up and down sort of thing?
Well, I think one thing is it seems like it's like Netflix is getting more power in the game. So now, or Amazon in those places, Netflix is now able to get Scorsese. And what I discovered with Netflix originals is that you can't get them anywhere else. You can only stream them on Netflix. So it's interesting to see like what, I think companies like Cinetel and, and New Image and them, they might get squeezed out by Netflix and Amazon, or it might be a situation where they need to pay a premium to get their stuff streaming. We might not have as much access to them, but yeah, I think it could be a situation where Cinetel and them, they might change course if they suddenly get access to these actors. You think of like Cinetel, watching Showdown in Manila. All of the actors that were in that, they were all people that I don't think any of them have really done a lot of big screen stuff. You had occasionally Cary Tagawa or Casper Van Dien, but for the most part they were kind of your mainstay DTV guys. And one thing that was different about that, of course, is that you could do a big ensemble with it, right?
Right.
But I think that's one thing for Cinetel is that it's going to be interesting to see, because they might think if I need to compete with Netflix, I got to try to get these actors in our movies too.
But then once again, it always comes back to money. I mean, do they have the money to afford the fees of the higher tier quote unquote actors?
And what they shoot in Russia.
Well, that's true. A lot of this stuff is coming from out of the U.S. It's Showdown in Manila. It could be Showdown in Detroit, but it's Showdown in Manila.
Well, that, and the other thing I think what they do is that they get the big name. I think of that China sales movie that I reviewed recently that was had Seagal and Tyson in it, and they weren't. Seagal was barely in it. Tyson was in it a little bit more, but the movie was supposed to be kind of like a pro-China, sort of I don't want to say propaganda piece, but the idea was it was supposed to be like celebrating China in the rest of the world. But because they spent so much money on Seagal and Tyson, they had to put them in everything, because it just wouldn't have made it worth it for them to spend all that money. I mean, they were the bulk of their budget. I think they were able to save money on their acting budget by having refugees from South Sudan.
Jeez.
But because the movie was taking place in northern Africa. But I think that's one thing that's going to happen with a lot of these is that you're going to say, okay, if we put all of our money into getting this big name on there, and we put all of our money into getting this big name in here, and then shoot for like a week and barely have anything else for the budget, it's going to be worth it for us. And that may mean the whole quality of the whole thing just drops completely, which, when you think about PM Entertainment, we say like, okay, there was, a lot of explosions, a lot of fun like that, but their budget went more into that kind of thing. They had a name, they'd always have one or two big names, but they always made sure that the special effects were good. And I think now it's like
great stunts.
Yeah, exactly. And so
they put money into the stunts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, you can tell they put care into it, and I think we as viewers respond to that. It's like, okay, you can tell that they care, and that care, and whether it be from the acting, the stunt work, the explosions, or just across the board, that quality level is attractive. That's something we want to see. We want to see that PM style car flipping in the middle of the street blow up that they trademarked, because they do it so well, and they have really good stunt people that really care.
And we can see the difference between that and CGI.
Oh my God, definitely.
Oh yeah, in Last Man Standing, you got Jeff Wincott. There's a huge explosion in the background. He's driving his motorcycle. It's in the same shot. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I think for me that's a big thing, is that it's going to be interesting to see when the DTV ones, if they get a chance at the big names, what do? Do they then cut the budget? Of course, the other thing too with these big names is I don't know how they feel about it, because we used to see it. You watch those old Italian ones, you get someone like a John Saxon in there,
right?
And just like he need the money, he'll take the money. Granted, guys like Dolph, they need the money. I think Dolph. I don't want to talk about his personal life too much, but I think he split from his wife or something, so he's got like, because there's a reason why he's suddenly doing a lot of movies. So I think that's part of it, is that like a lot of these guys suddenly they have money issues, or they need money, so they're like, let's kick out a bunch.
They pump them out, like some of the bad ones, like Ambushed, or
right, yes.
4 Got 10, or whatever that one was.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like Nicolas Cage syndrome. I mean, he's got to work, but I think a lot of actors, especially British actors, they like to work. Like that's why Donald Pleasance and Malcolm McDowell and Michael York are in so many of these movies. I don't think they care. I just think they like to work and they enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, you think like old Ernest Borgnine and those kind of.
Oh yes.
Same.
Who was from our hometown, by the way.
Yeah, Hampton. We have Ernest Borgnine Park.
Yeah, we have an Ernest Borgnine Park, and he went to my high school.
That's amazing. You have an Oscar winner from your high school.
Yes. So anytime the Borgnine name comes up, I have to bring that up. But anyway, I don't want to derail the conversation.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, no, because I think it's we're celebrating Reb Brown here.
Yes.
As for being in the Hall of Fame, and it is interesting to see sort of because we both kind of started doing this blog around the same time. Because I think we both kind of, I don't know about you guys, I think we got into like these kind of movies in like the mid to late 90s, really
for sure.
in earnest. And then it didn't seem like things changed that much between the mid to late 90s and the 2000s. It seemed like it's the late 2000s, maybe when with the rise of Marvel picture, I'm not sure what it is, but it seems like the last 10 years ago or so is when things have really changed.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, the heyday of DTV, I think it sort of peaked in the mid 90s because, separate and apart from the Marvel thing, by 98, 99, that was a very fallow time for DTV. I don't know if you would agree with that, but that not a lot of great stuff was coming out. I mean, yes, there were exceptions, but there were some pretty dire things coming out in the DTV world around the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
some of the late Lamas wasn't the best.
Yeah, and like Michael Madsen with like Surface to Air, and
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Like a lot of plane slogs, as we call them, and it's that not a great time, but because that was in a valley. But then when Scott Adkins came on the scene, he kind of revitalized things.
Yeah, with Ninja, right?
Yes.
Ninja 2.
Fantastic. The Ninja movies. Yeah.
Those were great, and I also think like Seagal and Dolph and Van Damme. I mean, they had hits and misses, but I think in the mid 2000s they started to put out a little bit better stuff. And then I don't know what happened as the decade went on, but it did seem like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a CGI thing, but it just seems like a lot of ideas that were just, I don't know, but lack of a better term, sauteed in wrong sauce, where it's like, like, I mean, I think you guys watched Blackwater recently as well with
yes.
Dolph and Van Damme. Now, Dolph and Van Damme used to be appointment viewing. Like you needed to watch, if the two of them were in a movie together, DTV, like that would be our dream. But you put them in this confined space in a sub where they're using rubber bullets, so it's like you can't take out the bad guys, and the bad guys can't take out them because they're just it was like, I don't know, it was billed to me as Die Hard on a sub, but it wasn't. It was something that was kind of just, I don't know. And
I call it a movie on a screen.
Yeah, it's just a movie. No, but your point is very well taken. I mean, you're right. In a prior time, not even that long ago, to have those two in a movie would have been a big deal. Now it's just kind of like, oh, here's another DTV movie for the pile, you know? And you're right. That's a bad turn. Like when those two are together and it's not an appointment, as you call it, which I agree with. What happened? Why did that happen?
And I think that might be something for people who are listening to this podcast who aren't as familiar with Reb Brown. If you can get out there and get some of those films, the ones we talk about, Robo War, Strike Commando, White Ghost is an interesting one because that's the one I'm doing for the pod, and it's more of a William Catt movie than it is like Reb Brown, but it does at the end. It has the moments where Reb Brown is in it, he's great, but I think that's probably not one that you should think about. But I think Strike Commando, Robo War, I think Space Mutiny is a fun one, but I think getting to what we kind of get people into that mode, I think Will at Exploding Helicopter had asked me why DTV, and I was kind of going over some of the reasons. It's not as affected maybe as the big screen movie. It's got a little bit more heart to it, but also as an action fan. Yeah, and I think as an action fan, we don't care as much if there are little things wrong with it. Whereas I think like horror and sci-fi, those people fans of those genres, they take it more seriously on that score. Like, okay, if the horror looks bad, I don't like the movie. Whereas we might like a fun horror movie that looks silly, But we could take an action movie with bad dialogue if the action's good and enjoy it.
No, that's a good point. And to that end, I don't want to forget about Cage and Cage 2.
Yes.
Oh, and Last Flight to Hell.
Yeah, and when he teamed up with Chuck Connors.
Yes, exactly. I was gonna say Last Flight.
We got to mention that because there's the part in the credits where it's not a screenplay.
Yeah.
It's a scheme-play.
Yeah, they misspelled the word screenplay in the opening credits.
Yes. Yeah, so I think for people out there that are trying, that are kind of new to DTV, or you're kind of just coming into this now, the new stuff. There are things out there for the new stuff that you can get into and watch. But I think these ones from the late '80s, the early '90s that have, again, not just Reb Brown ones, but you could look at a lot of different ones. But I think while we're spotlighting Reb Brown, I think it's a shame if anybody hasn't seen these ones. And I don't know how, like you said, there was a Blu-ray of Robo War, which
yes.
That might be, that was probably for me to get. It might be a little bit too much for people that are trying to get the hang of this stuff. But
right, yeah, I don't know if I'd say that for a beginner, but it is out there. And once you get into Reb, you might want it. But on the Your Blu-ray, which I also own, there is a Reb Brown commentary.
Yeah, so and
Nice.
Reb Brown, I've seen him in
listened to
interviews, and he is fantastic. He just seems like the nicest guy. He's really great, and I think some former guest that we had on the pod, he had talked about actually talking to him, and so let me see if I can pull this up here, because I had talked with him about he used to do let me see if I can see. There it is, Sector 4 Extraction. He did a movie. He was a screenplay writer, and I feel horrible that I cannot. That it's not coming to me right now. But he talked to Reb Brown about his movies. Those like kind of the schlock movies, and he said, yeah, they weren't great, but they paid for my house.
I think he says something like that on the Your commentary, which you're right. He comes off as very nice, just like a nice guy, very self-effacing, doesn't take himself too seriously, but enjoyed his time doing this kind of stuff. And he just really seems like a good guy.
Yeah. Richard Pierce was the name. I thought it was Richard Pierce, but I wanted to make sure I got it right before I said it, because I have a habit of messing up last names and stuff like that. So Richard Pierce, he was on the podcast a few years ago. He did a movie called Sector 4 Extraction, but he was a screenplay writer. But when he was in school, he did a newsletter or something about bad movies, and Reb Brown was one that he focused on, and he actually got a chance to interview him, and said, yeah, he was just the greatest guy. I think that's another important part of it, is that I think Reb Brown had fun making these movies. He enjoyed them, and I think that helps us in watching it.
Yes, I agree.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Personable. Likable, really.
Yeah,
likability, that's huge. A lot of it seems like newer people, I don't want to question Kellen Lutz's personality, but he doesn't seem to have that likability that a Reb Brown has. Like, you were instantly almost a warmth.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, and I think it comes through in the movie. If the actors in it are really invested, and they're not thinking like, oh, I used to do big screen movies and now I'm doing DVD.
Look at Seagal or even Bruce Willis. You just see his stunt double now.
Right.
Well, there does seem to be some disdain, or as fake Shemps, as that guy calls them, where it's like not even them half the time.
Yes. All right, perfect. So I think it's probably a good time for us to wrap up, but did you guys have any final thoughts on Reb Brown?
Ty?
Well, you can go ahead first. I'll think of something quickly.
I think kind of what we were just talking about kind of sums it up. I think he had that likable quality. He has a certain commanding screen presence that you like to watch, and that fun quality that he has is very appealing to us as viewers. And of course, there's the scream. I mean, what more do you want?
Right, the scream.
It's the cherry on top for Reb. Yeah. It's just that great scream.
Yeah.
And not to take up too much more time, but I just really quickly throw out a couple titles we didn't mention, such as Street Hunter, the movie he did with Steve James.
Yeah.
And it is. And Mercenary Fighters.
You definitely get a scream in that one. I think he's with Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
Peter Fonda, yes.
Yeah, and one more, and The Firing Line, the movie with Shannon Tweed.
Oh, yes, that's right. Wow, yeah, so he's had some good ones there. Yeah, so he's that period in the late 80s, early 90s, he has a bunch. And yeah, I think you can't go wrong with really any of them. But I think, if you can find Robo War and Strike Commando, Strike Commander, those are the ones to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
Space Mutiny,
I mean, yeah, if you want to have some fun, you can go with Space Mutiny. Right. I mean, they're all fun, but that's definitely very silly, even with or without the MST3K. It is very silly. I think Cameron Mitchell plays the guy who looks like Santa Claus.
Exactly. Yeah, so he's a great actor. Yeah, for sure.
And he's worthy of a podcast in his own right.
Yeah, Action USA and what's the Deadly
Prey.
Deadly Prey, yeah.
Yes,
of course, yeah.
Which is
well, I mean, Ted Pryor. I mean, in the Pryor family, that's another subject for another day.
Yeah, and that's another AIP, I think, right? It's Deadly Prey.
Premier AIPs. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of really great ones in that genre to look at for sure.
Yes.
So, now, before we wrap up, do you guys want to let everybody know where they can find you on social media and the podcast and everything?
Well, on Twitter, it's under Ty Comeuppance, and see what we have coming up soon.
And of course, there's our website, comeuppance-reviews.net. Not .com anymore. It is comeuppance-reviews.net for anyone who wants to check us out. And of course, there's our podcast. So if you just go on iTunes and you go to the search and type in Comeuppance Reviews, we will come up. And so we appreciate that.
Yeah, I have an i4, so I can't subscribe to anybody's podcast, unfortunately.
Oh, I didn't know you can't subscribe on that phone.
It's so bad. It's in bad shape. I need to get a new phone. That's the problem. But so I usually will search and Comeuppance Reviews. It comes up right away, and yeah, we're good to go.
We'll have to have you on our podcast.
Oh yeah, we got to return the favor here.
Yes, sure. I would love to be on and talk about I mean, I think it's as you can see, we just killed an hour just talking about this. Really
I know it just goes by so fast.
It does. So yeah, I'm happy to always come on as well. And thank you guys so much for coming. This has been really great. And
happy to do it.
No, it was so much fun. I had a lot of fun.
I had a blast.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you guys, and we will talk to everybody soon.
Yes, thanks again.
All right, thanks again.
Who took my purse?
All right, I have to hear Reb one last time before we wrap up here, but I just want to thank Ty and Brett again for a great conversation. Thank them again for coming on the show. It was really great to have them. Again, you can check them out at comeuppance-reviews.net. Also subscribe to their podcast on iTunes, Comeuppance Reviews. And then for us, you can find the blog at dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com. You can also find us on Facebook. You can like us at Direct to Video Connoisseur. We're on Twitter at DTV Connoisseur, Instagram now, DTV Connoisseur, and of course on Tumblr, just DTVC. Check us out. By all means, drop us a line. Let us know what you think. If you've got ideas, things you want me to talk about, anything like that, and I'll be happy to do any of that. All right, thanks again, everybody, for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.